I never thought my own living room would feel like an interrogation room, but that morning, when the flashing red and blue lights bled through my curtains, I knew everything I had carefully built was about to detonate. And the cruelest part, it wasn't a stranger who lit the fuse, it was my family, the sound of heavy boots on the porch, sharp knocks, 3 times, the kind of knock you don't ignore, MS Raman, Department of Homeland Security. My heart plummeted. For a second I wondered if this was some twisted prank, but when I opened the door and saw the federal jackets, the tactical gear, and the black SUV swallowing the street, my blood turned to ice. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions about the contents of a file folder recently accessed from this address." The agent's voice was calm but clipped. He knew exactly what he was looking for. I didn't need to ask which folder. "Basic work files." That was the name of the folder sitting innocently on my personal laptop. A folder that contained nothing basic at all, at least not for ordinary people. For me, it contained encrypted files tied to sensitive cybersecurity operations I managed through my government contract job. Files that in the wrong hands could burn countries. The problem, someone had opened it last night, and it wasn't me. 12 hours earlier, I was sitting at my kitchen counter, sipping cheap instant coffee, my mind drowning in the gray fog of another exhausting week. Work had been brutal, marriage was hanging by threads I no longer had the strength to hold, and my sister's family, who had moved in temporarily after their financial mess, was treating my home like a rent-free hotel. I loved them, I really did, but love and trust are 2 very different currencies. Why do you keep that ugly old laptop locked up like it's gold? My brother-in-law Adil had teased the night before. He was a smooth talker, the kind who could lie and make it sound like a compliment, because it is. I'd replied curtly, snapping my locker door shut. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival. That laptop was my entire professional life. I'd worked in cybersecurity long enough to know one wrong click could destroy everything. But in the back of my mind, something had been gnawing at me lately. Someone had been watching me too closely. The late-night login attempts, the way my Wi-Fi blinked irregularly, and Adil's curious eyes. When the agents entered, my living room transformed into a crime scene. Every movement they made was efficient, cold, rehearsed. My mother was sobbing in the corner, wrapped in a shawl. My sister Noor stood frozen, clutching her daughter like she'd been caught stealing. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, placing my laptop on the table. This device was used to access classified information through an unauthorized fingerprint login at 2:14 a.m. Were you aware? I shook my head slowly, my throat tightening. Adil cleared his throat. It was just a folder labeled Basic Work Files, he said weakly. I didn't know it was a what. The words ripped through me before I could stop them. In that instant, something cracked inside me, not the kind of crack you can tape back together. The agents exchanged glances. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us for questioning. Your entire household may be subject to investigation." I watched as Noor's face crumpled. My mother whispered my name like a prayer. I'd spent a decade building an identity as a strong woman in a male-dominated field. I'd clawed my way out of broken relationships, betrayals, and endless judgment to get here. But none of that mattered now, because a man I let stay under my roof had turned my life into a ticking bomb. And he wasn't sorry. I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't scared for me. He was scared for himself. I took a deep breath, tasting the bitterness of betrayal on my tongue. The agent leaned in. MS Raman, who else had access to this device? I looked at Adil. At my sister, at the family I once trusted more than anyone. My voice came out like shards of glass. Apparently, I said everyone but me. And just as they began reading out the warrant, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war? The next morning, the envelope still sat on the table like a silent accusation. I couldn't eat. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, mingling with the soft light of dawn. I ran my fingers over the edges of the paper, as if touching it would somehow give me answers. $15,000, 2 weeks, and the weight of a family name that had always been heavier on me. I worked double shifts at the hospital, enough to pay rent and survive, but not enough for sudden demands. And Sophia knew that. She always knew where to hurt at 6:30 a. I tied my hair into a messy bun, put on my scrubs, and forced a smile into the mirror. You got through worse, I whispered to my reflection. You can get through this. But as I walked into the hospital that morning, the memory hit me the night 5 years ago when I had begged Sophia for help. It wasn't just hospital debt, it was survival. Daniel had left, Mom had just died, and I had been too broken to think straight. She'd paid the bills then, and she'd never let me forget it. "Hey, Maya," came a soft voice. It was Erin, my coworker and the only person who knew some of my story. She handed me a coffee, warm and sweet, a small act of kindness that meant more than words. "You look like hell," she said gently. "Thanks." I muttered with a tired smile. "Just family drama." She raised an eyebrow. "The sister," I nodded. Erin sighed. "You've spent your whole life cleaning up after everyone. When's the last time someone did something for you?" The question lingered in the air. During my break, I went to the hospital courtyard, my quiet place. Trees whispered softly, and the faint smell of wet grass filled the air. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my messages until I saw her name. Sophia. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to scream that I didn't owe her anything. But then I thought of my father, how he'd look at me with that disappointed frown. "She helped you, Maya. Be grateful." Gratitude had become a chain I wore for years. I glanced up and saw a familiar face on the other side of the courtyard. Alex, Sophia's son, 19, all charm and confidence. He was laughing with friends, wearing his expensive jacket, carefree in a way I'd never been allowed to be. I hadn't seen him in months. He caught my eye and walked over. "Aunt Maya," he greeted casually, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Mom told me you'd help out with my tuition." My breath caught. "She what?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. 15 grand's not that much, and you're a nurse. You're like loaded." I laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. "Loaded? I'd skipped lunches to pay electric bills." "Alex," I said carefully, "I don't have that kind of money." His smile faltered, then figure it out. "Mom said you owe her. I didn't ask you to be broke." The words hit like stones. Entitlement, the same entitlement Sophia had worn like perfume all her life. I watched him walk away without a second glance. My chest tightened, my palms sweaty. The humiliation burned deeper than I wanted to admit. That night after my second shift, I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by unpaid bills. The clock ticked like a metronome to my panic. I opened my drawer and pulled out an old brown envelope, one I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a letter Daniel had left me, a letter full of empty promises. "I'll send money soon. I didn't mean to hurt you." Lies that smelled of whiskey and betrayal. I had survived that. I could survive this. But something inside me shifted that night. I was tired. Tired of being the good sister. Tired of paying for other people's choices. Tired of being afraid to say no. I wasn't going to let Sophia hold this over me anymore. I reached for my phone and opened a contact I never thought I'd call again. Ethan, a lawyer I'd met during my divorce. "Hey," I said when he answered, my voice shaking but steady enough. "I need to ask you something, about debts and about family." And as the conversation unfolded, a strange, unfamiliar feeling began to grow inside me. Power. The day of reckoning arrived faster than I expected. Sophia showed up at my door again, this time with that same smug expression, like someone about to collect a prize she didn't earn. "Well," she asked, stepping inside without being invited. "Do you have the money?" I looked at her, really looked. For years, I'd seen her as unshakable, a wall I could never climb. But now, as I stood there in my worn sweater and tired eyes, I realized something. She wasn't powerful. "She just made me believe I was powerless. I'm not paying," I said simply. She froze, lips parting. "What? You heard me. I don't owe you $15,000. Her laughter was sharp. "You think you can get away with this, after everything I've done for you?" I reached behind me, pulling out a folder. I'd spent the last week talking to Ethan, gathering receipts, agreements, proof. I placed the folder on the table, the same table where the envelope had sat like a curse. "I paid you back," I said, "every cent, plus interest. Legally, I owe you nothing." Her face paled slightly. I continued, my voice steady now. "And if you try to pressure me again, I'll file a harassment report. I've already spoken to a lawyer." "You wouldn't," she hissed. "I would," I said, "and I will." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, not power, not arrogance, but uncertainty. She tried to laugh it off, but her hands trembled. This is family, Maya. Family doesn't threaten each other. Family doesn't hold each other hostage either. I shot back, you've been doing it for years, and I let you, but not anymore. Sophia took a step back. Her mask was cracking, and it was almost surreal to watch. The woman who had always stood above me now looked. Small, you're making a mistake. She whispered, no. I said softly, I'm finally not. She left with no heels, clicking victory that night, just silence. And when the door shut, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. A week later, Alex sent a text short, sharp, full of the entitlement his mother had fed him all his life. Guess you don't care about family. I smiled at the screen. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I was still broke, still tired, still fighting life every single day, but I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. That night, I lit a candle in the small living room, letting the warmth wash over me. The quiet no longer felt like suffocation. It felt like strength. Sophia might hate me for standing up to her, my father might frown, Alex might resent me, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I had finally chosen myself. And for a woman who had spent a lifetime bending for others, that was worth more than $15,000.